Welcome to our noon edition of Arirang News. Here are the stories making the headlines at this hour. A breakthrough has surfaced in the standoff between the government and doctors. Officials have decided to temporarily stop suspending the licenses of doctors who have taken part in a mass walkout. We're yet to see whether this will bring back medical school professors who began submitting their resignation letters on Monday and are now working at a reduced 52 hours per week. South Korea saw its lowest fertility rate ever last year. Statistics Korea says the country's population is expected to drop to as low as 36 million in less than 5 decades. For the first time since the start of the conflict in Gaza, the UN Security Council has called for an immediate ceasefire. Washington did not veto the measure, which prompted a strong rebuke from Israel. The government has delayed slapping medical license suspensions on trainee doctors, aiming to find a middle ground by bringing them to the dialogue table. In a briefing earlier today, the health ministry said it would set a date as soon as possible so that they can sit down for talks over the government's plan to expand the med school quota by 2,000 from next year. Officials remain adamant over sticking to their original plan and finishing off measures by the end of May. Song Yujin starts us off.
The Korean government has reportedly postponed the suspension of medical licenses for trainee doctors who've walked out in protest of increasing the med school admission quota. Suspensions were set to start on Tuesday, but an unnamed official from the presidential office told Yonhap News on Monday that things are on hold temporarily. The official said the government cannot carry out license suspensions while trying to engage in dialogue with the medical community. Over the past several days, the government has been softening its hardline stance. On Sunday, President Yoon asked Prime Minister Han Duk-soo for flexible measures to resolve the dispute and establish a constructive council for consulting with doctors. Health Minister Cho Kyu-hong on Monday also described such efforts by the government.
The government has immediately begun working towards establishing discussions with the medical community and will come up with a day for both sides to sit down for talks as soon as possible.
But the minister made it clear that the government will stick to its original plan to increase the med school quota by 2,000 from next year.
We will certainly complete the goal of the expanding medical school admissions for the first time in 27 years. We ask for your support until the end.
The medical community says it's willing to talk, but with conditions.
Unless the government withdraws its plan to increase the medical school quota and allocation, this crisis cannot be resolved. We are ready to discuss all pending issues in front of the public, but I don't believe withdrawing the plan equals to eliminating the expansion entirely.
But it appears there's still a long road ahead for dialogue. Professors from most of the country's 40 medical schools began submitting their resignations on Monday in solidarity with trainee doctors who have been in a standoff with the government since last month. Some schools witnessed the majority of their professors resigning, including 433 out of 770 at Ulsan University. While they've been covering for the trainee doctors, the Medical Professors Association of Korea announced on Monday morning that professors who continue to work even after submitting their resignations will start reducing the number of outpatient appointments to focus on intensive or emergency care. They'll also cut back their weekly working hours to the legal maximum of 52 due to excessive workloads. Song Yujin, Arirang News.
Prospects of inflation in South Korea rose for the first time in 5 months in March. According to a Bank of Korea report released on Tuesday, consumers expect to see an inflation rate of 3.2% over the next year, up 0.2 percentage points from the previous month. The agency said that perceived inflation and high prices of agricultural goods such as fruits led to the increase. The Composite Consumer Sentiment Index, meanwhile, fell slightly in March for the first time in 4 months. Visiting the chip stronghold city of Yongin today for another round of policy discussions, the president says new facilities will be centered on that city for a mega semiconductor cluster. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young has the details.
President Yoon has promised new homes, roads and urban facilities to support a mega semiconductor cluster centered on Yongin City in Gangwon-do province. This came on Monday as he held the 23rd edition of his series of public policy discussions with citizens. Returning to Yongin, where he held his first policy talk on building a semiconductor mega cluster in the wider province, Yoon laid out plans to scale up the quality of work and life in the city through supportive infrastructure projects. As chip giants Samsung and SK Hynix invest some 500 trillion won or $372 billion into the city as the axis of the semiconductor belt, according to the government's estimates, new residents and commuters are expected to flood in to top 1.5 million in the near future.
용인이 이렇게 커 나가기 위해서는 행정, 교통, 주거를 비롯해서 민생과 직결된 인프라를 확실하게 구축하는 것이 가장 중요합니다.
This includes a semiconductor expressway stretching across the cities of Yongin, Hwasong and Ansong. Yoon also said the national highway Route 45 will be expanded, along with improved roads and railway lines connecting the provincial cities to enable an easier commute. To upgrade urban livelihoods for new city dwellers, Yongin will create a residential and cultural complex town along with smaller townships to provide quality housing and amenities for the younger generations and senior citizens. A new semiconductor Meister High School will also open in Yongin to foster a local talent pool for the surrounding chip industry. To facilitate these plans, the government will push to enact a law on special cities to give them more decision-making authority for their respective development projects.
아울러 시립박물관과 시립예술관 설립에 관한 중앙정부의 권한을 지역으로 대폭 이관해서 자유롭게 설립할 수 있도록 하고 청년들이 용인에서 문화예술 기량을 마음껏 펼치고 창작 기회를 누릴 수 있도록 함과 아울러서 시민들의 문화예술 접근권도 높이겠습니다.
Yongin, along with Changwon, Suwon and Goyang, have been designated as special cities with more than 1 million residents. Last year, Yongin was selected as a candidate site to build a national industrial complex and became part of the government's plan to foster a 21 million square metre semiconductor mega cluster across Gyeonggi-do province. The cluster is expected to be the largest in the world by 2047 and capable of producing 7.7 million wafers per month by the year 2030. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
South Korea posted its lowest fertility rate ever last year, and a bleak projection showed that those aged 65 and above could make up the majority of the population in less than 50 years if that trend continues. Our Moon Hye-ryun has more on Statistics Korea's latest annual report on Korean society.
As the number of births in South Korea plummets, the country's population is also on a downward spiral. That's according to the annual report on Korean society released by Statistics Korea on Tuesday, which showed that South Korea's population came to just over 51 million in 2023. It's forecast to drop to as low as 36 million by 2072, with some stark differences in the proportion of age groups in the population. Last year, those aged 15 to 64 made up the majority of the population at just under 71%. But less than 50 years from now, this age group is expected to be around 46% of the population, with people aged 65 and above making up the majority at over 47%. This bleak projection comes on the back of the lowest fertility rates the country has seen since data was first compiled in 1970. In 2023, the fertility rate in Korea, the average number of children a woman is expected to have in her lifetime, dipped to 0.72 births. The total number of births recorded came to around 230,000, and this is less than a half of the total tallied in 2012. This figure has seen a consistent decline since the 2000s, considering in 2000 around 640,000 babies were born. This fell to the 400,000 range from 2002 to 2016, picking up pace and falling to the 300,000 range between 2017 and 2019. And down to the 200,000 range from 2020. Data from the same report also show that more and more people are choosing to live alone. The percentage of single-person households in South Korea was 34.5% in 2022, compared to around 27% 7 years before that. The percentage of single-person or two-person households have seen an upward trend over the years, while those with 3 or more people have seen a consistent drop, showing the social trend where fewer people are choosing to get married or have children. A survey conducted by Statistics Korea last year showed social issues that affect an aging population. with many of those aged over 60 years old saying that they felt lonely or that they felt nobody really knew or understood them. While on average, the proportion of people across all age groups responding that they felt lonely dropped by 0.7 percentage points compared to the year before. A higher percentage of people in their 50s and 60s said they felt lonely compared to younger age groups. 문혜련, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol called on the nation to remember the 46 servicemen who died when North Korea torpedoed the South Korean Cheonan warship 14 years ago. This came at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday where the president commemorated the day the seamen lost their lives and issued a warning to North Korea, saying its provocations will never be tolerated. He also condemned North Korea's illegal and inhumane detainment of South Korean prisoners of war and abductees and called on the regime to return them to the South. He noted that in August last year, Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo declared their joint intent to resolve the issues of abductees, detainees, and prisoners of war being held in the North. Addressing those who deny past tragedies inflicted by the North, Yoon Suk-yeol said South Koreans must unite against the forces that aim to divide the nation by distorting facts and spreading propaganda, even to the extent of insulting the memories of national heroes. North Korean leader's sister Kim Yo-jong says Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has proposed a summit with the regime as soon as possible. But she also warned that an attempt to resolve the issue of Japanese abductees in North Korea would be seen as a, quote, bid for popularity. Meanwhile, Kishida mentioned that regarding the possible summit, nothing has been decided. Peunji reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's powerful sister, Kim Yo-jong, has said Japan's prime minister has conveyed hopes of a summit at an early date. In a statement on Monday released by the regime's state-run news agency, she said improving their bilateral relations depends on Japan's political determination, and that there will be no breakthroughs as long as the Kishida administration brings up the issue of Japanese citizens abducted to North Korea. When asked about the report, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said in a parliamentary session on Monday that he has always thought a summit would be important to resolve various issues.
As I've said before, to solve the abduction problem and other North Korean issues, a summit is crucial. I have been working directly on realizing this with North Korea through various channels.
One expert says North Korea's aim to pressure Japan indicates that the two sides have not yet been able to reach an agreement.
It seems that there has been communication between North Korea and Japan, but they have not been able to reach a meaningful agreement. North Korea appears to be using a mixed strategy aimed at pressuring Japan to make a political decision.
Kim Yo-jong's latest comments come a month after she said North Korea is open to enhancing ties with Tokyo, even inviting Kishida to Pyongyang. Pundits say North Korea aims to use the summit to weaken the trilateral partnership between Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington, and eventually use the meeting as a stepping stone for a summit with the United States. Japan is said to hope that the summit can act as a way of increasing Kishida's approval rating by resolving the abduction issue, which has been a main obstacle in its relations with North Korea. In 2002, North Korea acknowledged that it had kidnapped 13 Japanese in the 1970s and 1980s to train spies in the Japanese language and culture. The regime allowed 5 of them to return to Japan that year, but said the others had died. But Japan says there were a total of 17 Japanese citizens and continues to claim that Pyongyang has yet to provide any acceptable explanation. If the summit takes place, it will be the first time in more than 20 years that the leaders of North Korea and Japan are meeting since 2002. Peunji, Arirang News.
The UN Security Council has demanded an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, urging an end to the hostilities that have devastated Gaza. Now, it is the first time that they've adopted one, and this critical resolution, though widely welcomed globally, has left Israel dissatisfied with Washington. Shin Se-byuk has more.
The United Nations Security Council on Monday adopted a resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas. The resolution, which passed 14-0 with the U.S. abstaining, demands an immediate ceasefire that could lead to a permanent and sustainable truce. It also called for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. This marks the first time the Security Council has adopted a resolution demanding a ceasefire related to the situation in Gaza.
This bloodbath has continued for far too long. It is our obligation to put an end to this bloodbath before it is too late.
The U.S. explained its reasons for abstention, stating that while it agrees a ceasefire is necessary, it believes certain, quote, key edits were missing in the resolution.
Certain key edits were ignored, including our request to add a condemnation of Hamas.
The White House National Security Advisor John Kirby stated in a briefing later the same day that the U.S. decision not to exercise its veto does not indicate a shift in U.S. policy direction. Kirby added that the U.S. backed a ceasefire but did not support the resolution because the text did not condemn Hamas. Following the adoption, Hamas welcomed the UNSC resolution, saying it was ready to engage in an immediate prisoner swap with Israel. Meanwhile, Israel, which has consistently opposed a ceasefire on the grounds that it would solely benefit Hamas, expressed particular dissatisfaction with the United States for not using its veto power this time. This led to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu abruptly canceling the planned visit of a high-level delegation to the U.S. next week. The White House expressed its very disappointment over Netanyahu's decision, but said talks between U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant would go ahead. 신새벽, Arirang News.
Despite the Islamic State or ISIS claiming responsibility for last Friday's terror attack at a concert hall in Moscow that killed over 130 people, Russian President Vladimir Putin insists Ukraine was involved. While Putin acknowledged that Islamists conducted the act, he says Ukraine was ultimately behind it. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
For the first time since the deadly terror attack at the ROKS City Hall near Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin acknowledged that radical Islamists were behind the attack that killed at least 139 people, including 3 children.
We know that the crime was committed by the hands of radical Islamists, followers of an ideology that the Islamic world itself has been fighting against for centuries.
However, despite ISIS releasing a 90-second video claiming responsibility for the deadly terror attack, Putin insisted that Ukraine was ultimately behind the attack.
And immediately a question arises, who benefits from this? This atrocity may just be a link in a whole series of attempts by those who have been at war with our country since 2014 by the hands of the neo-Nazi Kiev regime. And the Nazis, as is well known, have never hesitated to use the dirtiest and most inhumane means to achieve their goals.
Washington once again refuted the accusation, calling it a propaganda campaign by the Kremlin, emphasizing that the Islamic State alone carried out the attack and had no connection with Ukraine. France also contradicted Putin, saying that their intelligence indicate radical Islamists were behind the attack and not Ukraine. Meanwhile, at a counterterrorism meeting chaired by Putin, the head of the committee investigating Friday's terror attack said it was carefully planned and prepared. It also said that all 4 key suspects, all of whom were Tajikistan nationals, pleaded guilty in court and testified in detail about the instructions given to them before carrying out the deadly attack. It's been reported that 3 more men from Tajikistan have been detained on suspicion of helping prepare the terrorist attack. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
There's a special wedding event here in South Korea for those who are financially struggling as part of efforts to better embrace them. My colleague Choi Soo-young files the story of a couple who fled from the north.
The groom and the bride bow to each other. After 6 years, Mr. Lee Il-duk and Ms. Park Kyo-shim finally had the wedding they had always wanted. Their faces lit up with bright smiles. Monday's wedding was made even more special with the traditional matrimonial ceremony being held in Korea House in central Seoul. Both the bride and groom are defectors from North Korea. Park fled North Korea in 2011 and settled in South Korea in 2018. But she struggled a lot, living as a single mother. A year later, she met Yi, and they formed a family, having 2 more children and sharing a common bond as North Korean defectors.
I got married because I wanted to be by his side. I support him whenever we struggle or are affected by illness.
However, due to financial difficulties, they couldn't even dream of holding a wedding ceremony.
My wife really wanted the wedding. Overall, everyone helped us enormously in everything. So we're really grateful. Thank you so much.
The South Korean government is actively supporting vulnerable families, including defectors like Ms. Park and Mr. Yi. As part of such support, the Cultural Heritage Administration and Korea House provide a traditional wedding ceremony and first birthday party free of charge to those in financial difficulties. These free ceremonies, including hair and makeup, dress and a reception, will be provided weekly until November 4th.
I hope that South and North Korea can become one, just like the meaning of a marriage becoming one. That's why we invited them first. It would be meaningful for defectors, our brothers and sisters, to be the first to have this traditional wedding ceremony.
Korea House Director Kim said they plan to expand the service next year to provide more people with opportunities and thus promote the beauty of Korean tradition. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. Following a New York judge's ruling on Monday, former US President Donald Trump's hush money trial is set to begin on April 15th. The new trial date means that Trump will become the first ever former US president to go on trial for criminal charges. Judge Juan M. Merchan on Monday scolded the ex-president's legal team for a last-minute document dump to postpone the original trial date. Trump's team argued that prosecutors deliberately concealed thousands of pages of records from a prior federal investigation. But Judge Merchan appeared unconvinced by the claims of prosecutorial misconduct, which he suggested to be groundless. A separate New York appeals court ruled on the same day that Trump did not have to pay $454 million fraud penalty ahead of his appeal, as long as he posts a smaller $175 million bond within 10 days. The $175 million bond is a victory for the ex-president, as it will block New York state authorities from processing the seizure of his assets. In Nigeria, some 137 school children have returned home after they were rescued on Sunday. They were kidnapped from the rural Kaduna state town of Kuriga and had spent more than 2 weeks in captivity. The children, many of them below the age of 10, were abducted from their school by gunmen on motorcycles on March 7th, triggering a rescue operation. 6 of the 137 students remain hospitalized, while a senior military official said that one staff member who was kidnapped with the children died in captivity. The school initially reported that a total of 287 students were kidnapped during the attack, but according to Kaduna's governor, Uba Sani, only 137 children were confirmed to have been abducted. Now to the UK's capital, where a convoy of more than 100 tractors drove to the British Parliament in protest against recent trade deals and cheap food imports. Farmers, some with Union Jack flags and banners with slogans including "No farmers, no food, no future," demanded that the government improve the country's food security by enforcing more accurate food labelling. They also called for an end to post-Brexit trade deals that allow the import of substandard, cheaper foods. Organisers Save British Farming and Fairness for Farmers of Kent echoed the message that unsupportive policies were putting the British food industry at risk. A Russian spacecraft docked at the International Space Station on Monday with 3 passengers, one each from the US, Russia and Belarus. The 3 members were Oleg Novitsky from Russia, Marina Vasilyevskaya from Belarus and Tracy Dyson from the US. The ISS now has a total population of 10. The Soyuz MS-25 spacecraft launched on Saturday with a 2-day delay after the initial launch was aborted due to a chemical power source issue. Space is one of the few remaining areas of cooperation between the US and Russia. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Hope you're adjusting well to the changeable weather these days. Rain that has been soaking the country since yesterday is letting up from the west, and the skies will turn cloudy by the time you head home from work. But as you can see, a mix of rain and snow continues through the evening in the east of Gangwon-do province. Mountainous regions in Gangwon-do could see up to 15 centimeters of spring snow with heavy snow alerts in place, while a wind advisory has been issued for the southeast coast and Jeju Island today. Rain brought a chill to the country. After a breezier start, highs should go up to similar to yesterday in most places. Seoul topping out at 13 degrees, but Busan and Jeju only make it to 11 degrees Celsius. Those of us in the west, however, can look forward to a partial sunshine by the mid-afternoon. There will be a rise in highs tomorrow, then a chance of more rain for Thursday, but the weather looks more promising towards the weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for you at this hour. We'll bring you more updates at the same time tomorrow.